And welcome to Integrated Chemistry Physics. What I would like to do here for your first lesson is just get an idea of what chemistry and physics are, and then give you some ideas of what is being studied when we talk about physics and chemistry. So let's get started. Physics, what is it? What will you be looking at? Chemistry is nothing more than the study of how matter and energy work. What is matter made up of? What is energy? And how do they work? Now, for our purposes, we're going to look at three different types of physics. The first of those is what we call classical physics. And then we will have quantum physics, and finally, the theory of relativity. Of these three, we will spend almost our entire time in this class with classical physics. Quantum physics and the theory of relativity are quite complex and a little harder than what we study here in this introductory to physics. So again, we'll be sticking mainly with classical physics. So when we talk about the theory of relativity, we're talking about Albert Einstein, one of the most famous scientists in the world of all times, and his most famous equation, E equals mc squared. Okay, and this talks basically, or very overly simplified, how energy and mass can be converted from one to the other. Another big part, or the second part of Einstein's theory of relativity, there are actually two parts, is the concept of gravity and the creation of space-time, or the warping of space-time. Quantum physics. Quantum physics deals with things such as atomic theory, particle physics, nuclear physics, what's the difference between fission and fusion, or that is the splitting and combining of atoms, and then condensed matter physics. We will do a little bit with condensed matter physics of particle theory and the atomic theory. And then finally, there is quantum field theory. Again, we will not talk about the quantum field theory. That is, again, a very complex topic. As I said, we will spend most of our time here in classical physics. There is a lot to classical physics. We will open up by talking about the laws of motion. We will get into the universal law of gravity. We'll get into classical mechanics. This is a little bit of how simple machines work, like levers and so forth. We will also look at optics. How do lenses work? What is the difference between a convex and concave lens? When do you need each? We'll talk about waves, both transverse and longitudinal waves. We'll talk about how waves can be changed through reflection, refraction, and diffraction. We'll talk about electromagnetism. What is electricity? What is magnetism? And how do those things work? Classical physics also includes how fluids work. This is called fluid mechanics. How does an airplane fly? What are aerodynamics, and how can objects be shaped so that they move through the air easier? And then finally, one of the main topics within classical physics is something called thermodynamics, and this also ties in with temperature and entropy, how things or particles speed up when energy is added and they slow down when energy is taken away. Now, so the next topic then is chemistry. So what is chemistry? Chemistry is study of what things are made of, their properties, and how they interact and change. So what is chemistry? We are going to look at matter and its properties. We'll look at the particle theory. We will look at the structure of the atom. We'll look at something called the periodic table. and we will look at chemical reactions. You will notice that the particle theory and the atom, and then certain things about matter and the properties also were talked about in physics. So there is an overlap between physics and chemistry. Okay, something to keep in mind as we go along. Now, if we look at matter and properties, we're going to talk about the states of matter, and then we're going to talk about the difference between chemical properties of matter and physical properties of matter. So those are just some things that we will study under matter and properties. Particle theory, there are basically 5 parts to that particle theory, and that's basically all matter is made up of extremely tiny particles. We call those atoms. Okay. If it is considered a pure substance, it has all atoms are the same. These particles are moving, whether it be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. Okay. Particle theory says that particles at a higher temperature move faster than those at a lower temperature. Okay, your thermodynamics. And particles are attached to each other, and that's how we make more complex molecules. Okay, is by combining atoms using special types of bonds. The modern atomic theory has basically 4 points to it: that matter is made up of tiny particles called atoms. The atoms of one element can not be converted into atoms of other elements by a chemical reaction. And we'll talk about that more when we get to that, when we talk about chemical reactions. All the atoms of an element have the same properties, but the atoms of different elements have different properties. And those atoms combine in very specific proportions to form compounds. The periodic table, here's a picture of the periodic table. Periodic table is something that was devised by a man by the name of Mendeleev, and it is a way of putting together atoms of similar properties, both chemical and physical. And finally, chemical reactions. There are 5 different types of chemical reactions that we will talk about. They are synthesis, decomposition, single replacement, double replacement, and combustion. We'll talk about what the difference between each of those are. We'll learn how to write symbols and formulas for different substances, and then we will learn how to write chemical equations and balance those chemical equations to represent chemical reactions taking place. Okay, so that is just a quick overview of what you're going to be studying throughout the year. Now what I want to do is explain to you your assignment that you will be doing for me, and that is what I call a PowerPoint collage of what is chemistry physics or physics chemistry. Your PowerPoint collage. In your PowerPoint you will need 5 slides. That first slide is nothing more than a title page. In slides 2 and 3, you will be finding pictures of physics topics. And in slides 4 and 5, you will find pictures of chemistry-related topics. You can see there how many pictures I would like on each slide. And then, as you can see there, you will need to label each of these slides. So what am I talking about here? This would be an example of your title page. What is chemistry physics? If you want to say what is physics chemistry, I do not care what order you put them in. Simply grab you a couple pictures off of the internet and then make sure you have your name. This would be your title page. And then you'll simply have 2 pages about chemistry or 2 slides about chemistry. You'll notice a picture and then a label, a picture and then a label. The labels can be above, below, or on the picture. It does not matter. So you'll do 2 for chemistry, in which you will have 5 total pictures, and then you'll do the same thing for this is physics. As you will see in the next part of this module, I have explained to you how to work with PowerPoint and how to use PowerPoint to create this collage. So make sure you watch that. Once you have completed that short video on making a collage, you should be able to get started and get that submitted to me.